Hello and good morning and welcome to the Retail Reset webinar. My name is Martin Corcoran. I'm the Managing Director of Summit and we are change makers in retail. And today we will be discussing searching for synergy, how to win SEO and PPC in 2021 and beyond. And I'm told that there are more than 350 people that have signed up for this webinar. So in the grand scheme of things, I think we've picked a topic and a theme that is really, really prevalent and top of mind now. And we've got some great content to share with you. So I'm just going to upload the presentation and then we can go from there. Let me just make that full screen. So fantastic. Thank you for joining. And we're really excited to get into it. So before we get going, I just thought I'd tell you a little bit about Summit, who we are and why we're really interested in this topic in particular. So we are change makers in retail. We've been in retail for 20 years. We're change makers in performance marketing. So we are absolutely dedicated and focused on search, social, display, and affiliates. We're dedicated to search synergy. So making organic search and paid search work really hard and absolutely perform at their maximum. And we're change makers in this space. And we as Summit are change makers for 28 of the top 500 brands and retailers in the UK right now, which is absolutely fantastic. So we have a breadth of experience and a depth of experience in this space. So hopefully we have some good opinions that we can share and some good insights and some practical tips. And at Summit, we are absolutely dedicated to making the complex simple and transparent, and we do that through using people, technology and experience to help our partners get absolutely maximum customer engagement and ROI, and that's absolutely what we'll be focused on today. So we have some absolutely terrific speakers on the block for you today. So I have two of the most experienced and well-regarded Summiteers with me today. So we've got Rachel Williams, who is our client director, and Carl MacDonald, who is content marketing strategist. And they'll be sharing their experiences and the Summit experiences from our client portfolio. We're also joined by Lawrence O'Toole, who's CEO of Authoritas and LinkDex, and they have absolutely unique insights in terms of the application of search, how to get the most from it. And then finally, we're joined by Evie Brockwell, who is Senior Product Manager at the behemoth Booking.com, who have absolutely great wealth of experience in terms of search, and we'll be picking her brains and helping her experiences and bringing those to you guys so that you can practically implement some fantastic new opportunities in your particular roles. Okay, so you'll be pleased to know there isn't much from me. I'm just master of ceremony today. So quick overview of the agenda. So I'm going to hand over in a moment to Carl and Lawrence, and they're going to give a bit of an in-depth in terms of the state of play in the search landscape with some unique proprietary insights from Authoritas. Then we're going to hand over to Rachel, who's going to share the Summit experience in terms of driving strategic efficiencies across paid and SEO. And then we're going to finish up with a really interesting in-depth fireside chat with Evie Brockwell from Booking.com. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Carl. If you would like to request to take the screen, Carl, and I'll approve that. There we go.
No problem. Thanks, Martin. Good morning, everybody. To start with, I guess there's no doubt that the search landscape is ever changing. So I just want to delve a little bit deeper into the state of play in the current landscape. So our recent Voice of the Customer research showed that despite growing social media usage and platforms such as Amazon, Google is still offering the greatest reach amongst digital platforms. Though, as you can see, YouTube does index quite highly here as well, which is quite interesting and something we'll touch on a little bit later. But if this data tells us one thing, it's that search marketing is still vital to any digital marketing strategy. Now, Google is very different to how it once was, both in terms of how it works under the hood and also in terms of appearance. It's constantly evolving, and Google's constantly testing new features and new paid elements with a view to providing the user with the most relevant results to match their search queries. So if we take a look at the Google search engine results page and how it's changed over time, we can look back to 2004, and here we can see The paid ads at the top there with the pink background really quite stand out against the landscape, and you can see the organic listings below, and there's quite a big difference between them. And we know anecdotally that many people didn't used to trust this kind of layout, and they were a bit hesitant to click on paid ads, as if they thought that because people had paid to have them there, they were not to be trusted, as well as the organic listings. And then we move on to the Google SERP in 2014, where you can see paid ads at the top, but much less invasive. The pink background's gone and just highlighted with a small sort of green label that says ad next to it, which can be easily missed at a glance. And we can also see new features coming in at the right-hand side as well. So we've got social media profile links at the bottom there, and the knowledge panel on the right-hand side. So it's showing that Google's surfacing more information on the actual SERP itself without necessarily needing people to click through to an actual listing. And looking at the modern day SERP, this is something that continues today. So today we have an absolute breadth of different SERP features that Google can and does surface on particular search queries. So we've got paid elements such as ads and shopping. And we've also got a wealth of organic features that may appear for a search term. So things like featured snippets, FAQs, people also ask, and that kind of thing. And we think that this graphic probably does show quite clearly how much more competitive the search landscape is, but also how much opportunity is there for advertisers as well. And what we do know is that this shifting search behavior has changed the way that people interact with search results as well. So looking back around 10 years, we can see that the click distribution between organic and paid listings was quite heavily in favor of organic, around 94%. But now we have a new sort of player in the game, which is around no-click searches. So around a third of searches actually end with no click through to a paid or organic listing. And that's because Google is finding new ways all the time of surfacing information on the actual SERP itself, which means that the user's search query is satisfied without having to click on a link, for example, through a featured snippet or an answer box. So I thought that was quite a good way of sort of setting up what we're going to talk about next. And to help us sort of demystify this a little bit further, I'm delighted to bring in Lawrence O'Toole from Authoritas, and he's going to take us through some interesting data around the current search landscape. If you want to take control, Lawrence, and give yourself an intro.
Still waiting for. Sorry, Lawrence. I was about to filibuster for you, fill time, but you.
It's okay. I think I've got control. We'll soon find out. So I've pressed a button. Yeah, there we go. So I'm Lawrence O'Toole. Good afternoon, everyone. Really pleased to be here in such a illustrious company, and also not having to drive 5 hours to Hull to meet the summit team or into London. So it's great to share some of the insights that we get in terms of SEO. And in terms of my background, I've been running what was Analytics SEOs, now Authoritas, since 2009. We acquired LinkDex, our major sort of UK competitor, in 2018. And we've been focused on building comprehensive SEO software and APIs. We've got a unique SERPs API, for example, that emulates a real user and analyzes not just page one of Google, but all of Google and other search engines in unparalleled depth. And we use this data to give fresh insights. And it was funny because in preparing for this webinar, I'd almost forgotten the fact that in the year 2000, I actually built a pay-per-click search engine, and we were selling clicks to small businesses when I was at Thomson Directories across Bing. Oh, sorry, it was MSN Live then, Google and Yahoo. So apparently things have moved on since then. And it was a good reminder for me that actually there's so much more value by combining the insights from SEO and PPC data. So we're focused on helping you grow organic traffic that converts, and we collect billions of data points every month. And I want to share some of the data that we've got with you to just give you some illustrations of how you could use this data, not just in SEO, which is kind of what I think of first, but also in across your whole search campaigns. So as Carl mentioned, gone are the days of, focusing on the 10 blue links. And if you're just tracking organic rankings, it is just not enough. And you need to look at the SERP landscape. And what I mean by that is you need to look at the universal SERP feature penetration, in your country. So here, for example, we've got 70 million keywords in 11 major markets. That's a subset of our big data universe, and we're just collecting stats. You could see I've got the top 20 here. There were 40 major stats of different SERP features, from stock prices to social media, that we are collecting. And what's interesting to see here is you can see the top one there is approximately 90% of all queries. We all know, you search on Google, you get those related search phrases at the bottom of the SERP, and by and large Google those will appear on every single SERP. But then after that, you've got things like images. About 57.8% of keywords generate images across that 70 million keywords across those 11 countries, and about 41% video, just over a quarter knowledge graphs, so on and so forth. And obviously ads and shopping a lot lower, but because obviously there's lots of keywords in there that are unmonetized, informational queries, for example. So, that's interesting, but it isn't enough. It gives you a sense of perhaps where Google's going, and as Google rolls out new features, it's quite interesting to see. So things like the research guides that you see in the e-commerce space for products, with 3 sort of video links or links to articles with videos, they're appearing in the US and the UK, but they're not appearing in many of the other markets right now. So it gives you a sense of the headroom of where Google's going and where the headroom for growth is. So video, for example, as Carl mentioned, is very prominent with YouTube, for example, and consumers' adoption of video. It's about 40% penetration in most markets, but it's about 50% in the US. So there's another 10% for growth. So this is useful, but is it enough? No. You need to understand what this looks like in your market, or in the markets that you operate in. So here's just a quick slide for consumer electronics. And here we were looking at a subset of the top commercial terms and looking at the SERP feature prominence. And you can see actually that it's different. So over 90% of keywords have people also ask. So, you really want to make sure that's built into your SEO strategy. Ads, obviously not surprisingly, 90%, but video, very prominent around the 90% mark, and shopping too. And then you come down a little bit lower, images slightly lower, places, 28% of all keywords were generating local results. So it's a good opportunity for bricks and mortar retailers to make sure they are getting their local SEO right. And then you've got things like research guides, as I mentioned, appearing for about 20% of all keywords. So understanding this is really useful when you look at it in your market. But is it enough? No. You need to go a step further. And if you've got a keyword ranking tool like ours or someone else's that actually uses a real browser rather than some sort of SEO hack to get Google SERP results or other search engines, if you're using a real browser, you can emulate what a real user sees, and you can actually look at the SERP layout. So you don't just focus on where I'm ranking organically, but you can focus on where you're ranking across your organic and those different universal SERP results, and look at the different ad features that are appearing in your marketplace. And what you see when you look at this is you can see what where your organic ranks are above and below the fold. And you can see here from this example in the consumer electronics space, 90% of keywords of top organic results for keywords on mobile were below the fold. And even major retailers, okay, it's only a subset of their keywords, but Amazon, for example, haven't got my glasses on, I can't read that number, but approximately just under 90% on both devices, mobile and desktop, of their number one organic results were below the fold of the page. Obviously on mobile it's higher and slightly less on desktop. So getting this perspective is useful because, let's say travel, for example, and Evie will be on later, but if you look in the travel industry, for example, the penetration of SERP results is different, but you're going to get things like Google's hotel finder, their travel finder, the destination guides, the route finder. Those things are appearing in the SERP, sometimes more than one. And if you're ranking and not bidding on generic terms, for example, you decide not to bid on some generic terms that you're ranking number one on, well, you may find that your number one rank is right down towards the bottom of the page, and actually your click-through rates drop accordingly. So really, this is, it's really important to get this perspective, not just of, organic ranks, not just universal SERP features, but universal rankings, your share of those universal rankings as well. So you understand what your share is and what the opportunity is, and whether your organic or universal ranks are above and below the fold, and what the real estate is around you in terms of bidding and advertising. But is it enough? No. You really need to go a step further and understand the user intent. And just so a little bit of background, SEOs have been talking about user intent for the last couple of years now, as you all know. Some SEOs will break it down into navigational, informational, and transaction. For me, that's not enough. And you need to break your keywords down into these 4 areas and separate informational queries, which might be fact-based, like how old is Barack Obama or something, and something more research-based, I don't know, best family SUVs, where there clearly is a commercial intent, but even if the consumer, it might be top and middle of the funnel, consumer may not be ready to buy. So we decided we would look at these different queries. So just to give you some definitions so we're all on the same page, navigational query is someone who is looking for a specific company, a brand, a product, a place, an entity, a social media handle, for example. Informational is much more facts-based, when was the Battle of Waterloo? Research, as I mentioned, something with a commercial intent where a consumer is window shopping, and transactional where they're being a bit more specific and and they really are looking to buy in their query. So what we do is we analyze the SERP that you saw Carla earlier talk about, those 40 features. We go into great depth for every single keyword and analyze everything, because it doesn't matter what I think the user intent is and as an SEO or what another SEO thinks. It matters what Google thinks and is showing to the consumers. And it's important to really understand the makeup of that first page. What does the smell of the SERP look like? And for me, it's you're looking at the type of sites that are appearing, the titles, the descriptions, the TLDs of those sites, are they government sites, are they PDFs, etc. You get into great granular detail. What's the navigation like on Google? At the top, is it shopping first, then images and video, or the other way around? All these little things are clues and signals to help you understand the user intent. And so what you get for a keyword, if you get something like a Mercedes, it will have a profile of NIRT. It'll have a little score, little signals across the board. Predominantly, it will be navigational. It's a branded term, and so its dominant intent will be navigational. But something like second-hand Mercedes, yes, it'll have some branded, it'll have some navigational intent, but it will also have some research or transactional intent, because there's some commercial, there's a commercial bias to the user intent there. So by having this data at keyword level, it can inform your SEO strategy, can also inform your PPC strategy. And what we decided to look at for the first time is just merging the SERP feature analysis and the user intent analysis and asking 2 questions. Does Google show particular features only for keywords with certain intent? And does it then show more of a certain feature where it shows, for a particular SERP intent than another? And the second way was just looking at every individual SERP feature, what's the average profile of the NIRT, Navigation Informational Research Transaction? What's the average profile? So we looked at some data. Obviously, I can't show all of that to you today. I'd happily share it and talk about it at length with many of you. I do believe Summit, we're going to share some of this data and the data I showed earlier on a Google Data Studio report for you after the webinar, which is great. But let's dive into a few things. So this is a baseline. I looked at earlier that almost 90% of queries, the related searches, if you see in the top left, they're appearing at the bottom of the Google SERP. And Google will typically return 7 or 8 for every keyword, irrespective of what the user intent might be. So you can see the average number of keywords coming back, the average number of listings we're counting there is about 7.5 across the board. And you can see that from the pie chart is pretty evenly split. So Google, irrespective of what the user's intent is, Google's going to show that. And that's useful as a baseline because it says our algorithm's on track, and it allows us to look at other SERP features and see how they differ, how they deviate from the norm. So not surprisingly, let's take ads and shopping. Okay, it's not rocket science, but it's a way of sense checking the data. 93.7% of ad results are triggered by keywords with a dominant transactional research intent, and 96.8% of shopping results likewise. Not surprising, of course, it means everyone's doing a good job of bidding on the right keywords, but there's still a few there bidding on navigational terms and an infinitesimally small number bidding on informational terms. What was interesting to me was actually Google shows on average more adverts per query for transactional keywords than it does for research keywords. And obviously there's less people bidding on navigational anyway. So, arguably you could think maybe research keywords, potentially there's less competition there than there might be for purely transactional keywords. So taking this data, let's say I'm marketing, baby products. I can look at different SERP features, and this is just a couple of examples, as it applies to my industry, as it applies to me. And I can say, well, what's my opportunity? So I'm looking at marketing baby products, and I can see that these research guides are appearing in the SERP nearly 97% of the time. And the keywords that they're ranking for are very high research and transactional intent. So they've got to be good keywords for me to rank. They've got to be, it's interesting for me to then try and look at investing in content, but it's also important to discover the keywords, the search volume, cluster the competitors, because you may be competing with different competitors in this space. So blogs, affiliates, different sites to your traditional competitors and other retailers. Featured snippets is a good example. Overwhelmingly, they're coming up for informational keywords, 3/4 of the time for informational keywords. But if you turn that around and go, actually, well, in my market, wouldn't it be great to know that actually 1/4 of those are branded terms, they're often product names, research or transactional keywords, and actually understanding those and understanding the central keywords that generate those featured snippets and how they relate to your pages could be a great opportunity for you to gain some really good position zero results for your SEO. So just skip, sorry, too far there. So that's great to know. And it helps you prioritize your SEO strategy. And when you look at question 2, which is the user intent by SERP feature, you can really see where Google's priorities lie. And if you look at the column on the right-hand side, it says Google vertically integrated. So what I was looking at here is the SERP features, whether the dominant intent was research or transactional, and whether Google had actually gone beyond the 10 blue links and integrated their own vertical. And what I mean by that is back in the day, job finders, if you had jobs, you're looking for, I don't know, a nursing job in London, you would see a result for Indeed or any of the other top job sites out there, Monster, etc. But now Google's got its own job finder result, and they've got their own destination guides, and they've got their own travel guides, and they've got that, so on and so forth. So every single one, with the exception of Knowledge Graph, which is clearly more brand oriented, the profile of those keywords are heavily biased towards research and transactional. That tells you the direction Google's going in that they are looking to prioritize where they can capitalize on consumer demand and consumer spending power and the advertisers that want to reach them. So the good news is, though, there are still some ranking opportunities, some SERP features with heavy research or transactional intent, where Google is still, hasn't completely vertically integrated and still is sending traffic to your site. So if you rank for that feature, you don't go to another part of Google, that traffic can go to your site. So featured snippets, find results on, people also ask, related entities and search, research guides and reviews, they are still good opportunities for you for your SEO strategy. So that's good, but is it good enough? You've gone from organic rankings to universal SERP feature analysis and universal rankings to understanding whether it's above the fold and understanding the user intent. But it isn't enough unless you're using that data in harmony with your PPC team. And for me, this is an unscientific view of SEO and PPC maturity. But those axes could be impact, they could be spend, they could be size of the team, they could be ambition. The more capabilities you have on either axis, the greater opportunity you have for search synergy and joining your data together. So at the lowest level, you're just starting out, you might be marketing a couple of products and try a few PPC ads and it works well. So you optimize those pages, or even vice versa. The next stage, you might start to run a few more PPC campaigns and suck some data and join it up in Excel with some ranking information and start to determine some bidding strategies and make some decisions around keywords that you're going to bid on based on data that you're updating periodically. Or then you might move to integrating the data into an SEO tool like ours, or some sort of online forecasting tool to merge the data more regularly and produce more accurate forecasts. And you get SEO platforms like us that do that. And then eventually you get to big data platforms where you can suck a huge amount of information in from all your PPC data, all your SEO data, all your understanding of SERP layout, and churn that data up to give you better commercial insights. And just by way of example, if I just show you a couple of examples, if I can get the slide to move on. So we're an SEO platform, we have a forecasting tool. By automating it, you can actually produce very good ROI forecasts, and you can customize it, and you can do more than you can do in Excel or easier than you can in Excel, because you can customize click-through rates at keyword level or keyword tag level. You can forecast your ranking windows and what might improve over time. So things like that are useful. If you go to a big data product, you can just go beyond looking at your own keywords and look at the whole market. And this is useful. So, for example, there are, of course, other SEO tools available, but we would look at the top 100 competitors in the marketplace, crawl every single keyword, build a huge universe of millions of keywords and cluster them. See how Google is clustering related keywords and pages together, see who the dominant competitors are, what the user intent is, and then using rank, search volume and click-through rates, try and understand the areas, the top right here, the axes are very small, hard to read, but the top right is the ones with the greatest potential SEO visibility, where you're strongest against the competition in that niche. And that's great, but it's not enough, because with SEO and PPC data, you can go a step further. And actually what you can do, I'm a bit skeptical generally about Google search volume data, but it is the only data really that's available at scale, unless you want to use clickstream data. And I have some views about that around privacy and bias. But you can substitute search volume data with your PPC performance data if you're operating campaigns at scale. And what does that give you? Well, if you mash all this data together and you understand, potentially, let's say you've end up with 10 pages that have all got 7x potential increase in SEO visibility. Well, you could focus on the 3 or 4 of those, or 300 or 400 of those, where you get 2x the return from e-commerce transactions or revenue through organic traffic. So not all pages are equal, even if they've got the same level of SEO potential. And the same mechanism, you can factor in your SEO budget and your PPC budget and cost savings by ranking higher, and that can play into your bidding strategies. And if you're really smart, obviously you could do all that dynamically through a combination of tools, technology, and people. So that's great, but is it enough? It's still not quite enough. And I know Rachel will go on to talk about this in a minute, but for me, you've really got to get the data, the tools, the people working together in harmony. So without laboring the point again, knowing your organic rank's not enough. You need to understand the SERP layout, but it's not enough. You need to understand content, user intent. You need to understand whether you're focusing on the right universal SERP features and whether your results are above and below the fold, and who is bidding on these keywords around you. To help you understand whether you should be bidding on brand terms, for example, or even bidding on some of these generic terms, depending on what the SERP layout looks like. This stuff is dynamic, it's changing all the time, and just having a static view of this periodically is not enough. You need to be A/B testing and working in harmony with your SEO team to achieve great results. So hopefully that's given you a flavor of some of the data that we have available. That's probably enough from me, and I can hand over to Rachel, who can talk about other SEO and PPC efficiencies.
Great, thanks, Lawrence. Yeah, plenty to think about there. I'm just requesting control, and hopefully I can skip on to the next slide. There we go. So yes, we're looking at how we can drive efficiencies across the channel. So I'm hoping we've got some compelling case studies here that will give you some food for thought in terms of how our teams are working together to drive some better performance for our clients. So I hope that the intro from Carl and Lawrence has helped debunk some of these myths, but over the years I've definitely heard each of these comments from various clients of ours. But actually what we're able to do is, by working together with SEO teams or our teams in-house working together, is really put some of these to bed and show that there are benefits to aligning your strategies. So we've grouped these into 3 different areas. We've got a few case studies, but starting off, we've got sharing hygiene data. So I've got a couple of examples here. First of all, sharing your SEO crawl data to identify PPC broken links. I know Google flags these up sometimes, but you'd be surprised how many aren't automatically flagged in your account. So this can obviously help to save you some budget. And then also using your Google or Bing search query reports to identify any rising search terms. So we did this recently with one of our startup brands, and the team were able to create a new piece of long form content on the site, and it actually really quickly became our 3rd best traffic driver on the site, because we were able to jump on a new term that was driving traffic in the market. So we're really happy with that. Something that we're doing often as well is testing messaging on paid search that we can then apply to our SEO meta descriptions. So we've got a case study on that coming up. And then also applying the SEO principles to improve our PPC quality score. So I've got a case study, and I know that's something that Evie and her team are doing as a matter of course as well. So I'm sure we'll come on to that in a bit more detail too. And then also really important, obviously budgets are a big talking point for each of our clients, and we want to make sure that we're balancing that resource and that media spend in the best possible way. And we've actually got a few clients where they are in some niche markets, so for instance selling CBD products or sensitive adult products, where actually bidding on paid search isn't really an option for them. So for one of our brands, we were getting SEO visibility for terms that was worth like over 800,000 visits a month. These keywords we couldn't have bid on paid search, so definitely need to be mindful of those kind of things. And then also, you know, if something isn't working well from an ROI point of view on paid search, can we actually take advantage of that through organic? And then vice versa, if something's dropped off from an organic point of view, can we bid up on PPC to take account for that? So yes, I'm going to go through each of these in a little bit more detail. So first of all, for one of our fashion clients, we actually did a test on some paid search messaging, and we found out what the best performing ad text was. We then took these learnings and applied them to the meta content for the homepage. And as you can see from the graph on the right, we saw a massive increase in click-through rates. This went up 19%, which if we apply average AOVs and conversion rates, this over the course of the year was worth over 900K to our clients. So obviously this testing and sharing those learnings was invaluable for them. As you can see from the bar chart, we then did a second test, which improved that further. So for us, it's really about a constant test and learn, and not just having those learnings in the paid search silo, looking at where we can apply those from an organic point of view as well. So I'm really proud of that. The next one is around optimizing our landing pages. So obviously from an SEO point of view, there are a number of principles we want to apply. We were doing this for Ernest Jones, and we actually saw the halo effect on our paid search traffic. So not only did we get the 20% increase in organic traffic for this particular landing page, we saw the quality score improve as well. That had a knock-on effect of the CPCs, which saved us 36% of our budget. So we're still driving the same amount of traffic through paid search, but for 36% less cost, which I think is really interesting. You know, sometimes people struggle to justify the spend on SEO. It's not as maybe clear cut as a media budget, but applying these kind of learnings and taking these numbers back to their managers, it really saw some good justification of that time spent optimizing those pages. And that's something that we're looking at across a broader set of terms, that where we maybe need to improve our quality score. So yeah, that was key for us. And then finally, our final case study we've got is around applying some learnings in terms of cross-channel keyword strategy. So as I mentioned at the start, we can do this where PPC terms are expensive or have a poor ROI. So, you know, some of those top of funnel terms might not actually drive a great ROI from a paid search point of view. It might be quite hard to justify. So that's where we'd look to support getting traffic through those terms from SEO. But then also we have seen a few of our clients see drop-offs when there's been algorithm updates, and whilst we work to improve those rankings once again, we've bid on those terms to mitigate against the traffic loss through PPC. But something else, I know it's a bit of a contentious subject, is brand bidding. We actually did this for one of our clients and saw that the click-through rate and traffic uplift through pausing PPC brand was far outweighed on SEO. So we were actually able to save over 100 grand in PPC cost each year through not bidding on brand 100% of the time. So yeah, all of these things give us really compelling numbers to take back to our clients for them to think about how best to spend their budget and where we should be optimizing our resource. That was a whistle-stop tour of some case studies of ours, but if you've got any questions on any of those, please shout up and we will come to those at the end. And now I'm handing back to Martin and Evie.
Fantastic. Stop sharing. Hi, Evie. Are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Hello, Evie. Welcome. Thank you so much for taking the time to share some of your thoughts and insights. And, you know, Booking.com are undisputably one of the behemoths in the search landscape. So good. I mean, I've got various questions. I'm sure there'll be more questions coming in via the Q&A chat box. If people would like to add those for the Summit staff, for Lawrence or for Evie, we'll do our best to get to as many of those at the end as possible. So Evie, I guess, welcome. Thanks for being here. Can you give us a bit of a take in terms of how Booking.com is coping with lockdown and coming out of lockdown, and maybe some changes in behavior and changes you're seeing in the search channel?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, it's great to be here as well. Thank you so much for the presentation. There's been some really useful insights for me as well. I've taken plenty of notes. But yeah, in terms of how Booking.com's doing, obviously we know that travel has been a very difficult industry to be in over the last year or so. And we started to see those changes back in like February last year, and we thought, you know, it's going to be a blip, it's not going to be that bad. And obviously it's turned into one of the biggest things that we've seen worldwide, and obviously at least my lifetime, I'm sure most people's. So we've had to adapt a lot to try and stay on top of that, and it's from multiple angles. So it's partially what our customers needing now and how do we cater for that, what are our partners needing in the hotel side of things, but also how we operate as a business. So we very much have been so successful from running plenty of experiments and having loads of data. And when the market and landscape shifts drastically, you can't rely on the A/B test that you used to as much. So you have to start looking into other strategies and trying to understand what customers need, which is also quite difficult in a changing landscape. So we started doing a lot of customer sentiment research, but customer opinions change on a month-by-month basis depending on how confident they feel in their own markets and what the government policies are. So it's been a bit all over the place. We've tried to stay on top of it. And some of the biggest trends that we've seen in travel are very much a shift to domestic travel, which I'm sure everyone will know from things that they've seen in the news. But some things that we saw that impact the way that we need to market and the way that we need to optimize our website are things like the Google Trends data started showing that searches for accommodation near me increased by 110% last year. So we had to start trying to add features quite rapidly to the website to help cater for that. And that's partially making sure that we're displaying the right content on landing pages so that customers can find those search terms, and we do featuring those right snippets, and we are ranking for the right things on those pages, and we're bidding on the right keywords. But also making sure that we're providing the right features so when customers go through that funnel, that we can make sure that they're converting as well as the market that we typically optimized for, so that we keep our ROI at a good place for all of the keywords that we are then bidding for. Yeah, so quite a few changes that we had to get out quite rapidly, things like filters, things like the way that customers search, and making sure that we have like the right level of map functionality and customers can narrow down the results. So it's been really interesting.
And how have customers responded?
Really well. So obviously that's where we've seen the majority of customers searching for, and we've seen quite a lot of our sales coming through from those channels. Some of the interesting things are things like pets filters. So people trying to filter for something like a pet, that increased like twofold. So there's been a lot that we've been able to optimize that has then helped people find the right trip for them.
Fantastic, fantastic. So I guess you've had to pivot your channel strategy relatively swiftly in that period. How has that worked across kind of both the organic and the paid teams? Have they had to work really closely in that time period?
Yeah, so I think obviously to start off with, because we're quite a flexible business, so we don't really have that many fixed assets, and a lot of our spend is from marketing spend and spend on PPC. There was a lot of scaling down what we're trying to do in the PPC space to make sure we are still getting the right ROI, and conversion rates obviously naturally changed. Like people are still dreaming of getting away, but they're less likely to book right now. So we saw a lot more traffic, but obviously with less intent. So we had to make sure that we were dialing PPC to the right level, but making sure that we were still optimized for SEO so that we were still getting the right level of traffic. So we'd see a mix change, but we'd still see that where we were ranking well, we were still continuing to rank well, but we were able to share insights across the different teams to make sure that when we're looking at where search terms are increasing, that we can focus our SEO strategy on these spaces, and also making sure that when we are trying to dial down things like PPC, that we can rank effectively elsewhere.
Fabulous. Great insights. And what does it mean for the future of Booking.com? Obviously, there's a lot of uncertainty around what's going to happen, how we're going to open up, how long it will last for. You know, has it changed the Booking.com roadmap in terms of the channel and the activities you have planned for the next year?
Yeah, so obviously last year there was quite a lot of exercises going on about where do we need to focus. So a lot of our focus, like I say, domestic, we know is huge. We know that intent for domestic, even from our own internal searches, shifted closer to 50% where it wasn't before. And there's certain markets that we've remained strong for. So Lawrence was alluding to earlier that like in different regions, different things perform at different levels. And for us, the US has remained particularly strong because they've not had the same level of lockdown experience that we have, and a lot of their travel is domestic anyway. So you start to change your strategy to work out how to focus on those kind of markets, and also how to dial up some of our marketing content where we are really good at certain things, where we're such a flexible company, you can cancel typically up to 48 hours before. In the US, often you don't have to pay until you get to a property. So how do we make sure we're focusing on the right level of messaging in those spaces? So it's partially your keywords and your search terms, but also partially when customers then land on the site, how are we giving them the information and the confidence to go through and want to continue to make those bookings?
I'm barring the uncertainty, because I guess there's so much that you can't control, we can't control. Is it, you know, what are the main challenges that you found, obviously, in terms of pivoting the strategy and being able to manage that kind of change in customer intent?
Yeah, I think a lot of it was being able to adapt quite quickly internally and make sure we're pivoting teams to be focused on the right areas. And that really helped us to be able to go, okay, right now, these are the key areas of strategic focus. How do we get marketing and the website development teams, and that's marketing across PPC and SEO, all aligned on these new pillars? And how do we quickly get those customer insights to understand what it is that customers have got intent for, what are they looking for, and how can we best provide them with the confidence to go through and make their bookings in those right areas? So yeah, it was a big strategic shift in just making sure that we didn't completely railroad things that were still strategic priorities, but we were all focused on the right markets. And now we're in a pretty good place with that.
And I think one of the things that you know, Rach touched upon it earlier, that you know, paid and SEO are totally different, and you know, that myth that actually they're you know, they're totally separate things and you can treat them totally separately, but actually there's a bunch of dependencies and things that if one performs well, it potentially means you can reach more, spend more, save. You know, there's serious knock-on impacts for both of those kind of channels together. How will Debunking.com manage that? Is there a singular team? Do you catching up every week? How are you sharing that data on quite a practical sense?
Yeah, so we have got separate teams. So we have got PPC specialists and SEO specialists, because obviously they are their own beasts to a certain extent. But as Rachel alluded to, there's so many synergies that you can get from that space. So we catch up on a regular basis, and as part of like the product development team, it's my role to make sure that we're optimizing our landing pages in the right way. And a lot of in the right way means, well, what are the ROIs that we're going to get on these things? So as Rachel mentioned, it's not just about how you're ranking, it's also how's your quality score? How are you making sure that you're getting the right ROI for your costs? And the same for us, conversion also applies to that. So all of those three things come together in tangent. So whenever we look at new priorities, it's my role to sit there and say, okay, like this is what we think a new strategic priority is. If we can increase our ROI by doing this on the website, and we can make sure we're ranking from an SEO point of view, we'll then be able to make sure we're bidding on these extra key terms where we weren't able to before because we didn't have the right quality for those key terms on the website. And we combine all of those to say, okay, well, this makes this number one priority by looking at all of those channels and what the wider holistic benefits will be. So we share a lot of insights when we look at new feature development, and we also have marketing coordinators that mean that these teams are aligned on an ongoing basis so that we are focusing on the right channels based on the marketing campaigns that we want to do at that point in time.
Fabulous. It sounds like you're kind of a bit of a linchpin between both of those teams, which certainly is, you know, in the summit experience, it's essential. You need those teams in the same room, having similar or the same discussions. So yeah, I guess one of the things that's clear is you're surfacing the right data at the right time to make good decisions across both of those channels. Can you just give us a bit of insight in terms of the reporting and the data and analytics that Booking.com use to make sure, you know, ultimately make your life easier and the channels more effective?
Yeah, so we have a lot of our own internal reporting. Obviously, as everyone is, we're very reliant on Google for a lot of their reports, but we do a lot of our own keyword research, and occasionally if we've got like big projects to carry out, we'll rely on different agencies to help us with that. But we manage to do quite a lot ourselves. So we'll pull together those different reports and these different views. And then, like you say, as a linchpin, it's sometimes my role to synergize those and say, okay, right, these are the keywords that we're performing well from a PPC point of view. These are the reports that we've got from Google that show us what our ROI is. This is what the keyword research shows. How can we combine those and work out what those top priorities then are? Obviously, we do a lot of our own internal reporting in terms of conversion, and we use our own A/B testing tools for a lot of things as well. So obviously, we A/B test PPC, we use a lot of Google for that, but internally we have our own SEO A/B testing tools that allow us to run different experiments to see if we change a certain feature to try and help us with certain keywords, does that, one, improve where we rank, but two, how does that then impact how customers go on to convert from there? So we get to bring a lot of those insights to the table as well. So it's not necessarily a lot of manual analysis to then pull them together, but it's just making sure that we pull from all of the right places to get a holistic view for what we think we should do then going forward. So how do we capitalize on what is working well, but also how do we understand where the opportunities are?
Fantastic, fantastic. And there's a question that has kind of just come into the chat box to me, but someone wanted to know, so Lawrence was talking about Google being integrated vertically in certain areas, and he talked around kind of the booking space and the travel space. Have you got any thoughts or insights in terms of how Booking.com are working with that, and how, you know, other brands and retailers might do similar?
Yeah, so like obviously Google are kind of a partner in our eyes. We obviously are very reliant on them, but we can work well together with them in certain spaces. Obviously, the more that they get into the travel landscape, there's obviously always going to be some nervousness from other companies as to how much Google are going to take over based on what they already know, because they have so much information, as we're all aware. But for the most part, obviously, we see that for generic terms, like that's where things like the Google hotel and Google flight searches will come up and be quite prominent. And like you say, from a transactional point of view, and they are vertically integrated from that side, but there's a lot of content that they don't necessarily display those SERP features for. So it's not particularly something that makes us nervous, and especially as Google is still operating in a model now where they direct traffic to the relevant websites. So it's a way that customers can easily get into a search if they want to. And obviously we still have quite a good level of people that come to our site directly, that know us as a brand, that like the way that the website works, and they can get everything in one place. So whilst we can continue to offer that experience, I think we still remain in a good place. But yeah, it's definitely something that Google started to move quite fast on a few years ago, and they keep adding more and more features. So it's always something that we need to stay on top of. And from a customer sentiment point of view, even when I use it, I think sometimes it's a bit intimidating that you just do a search for something and the first thing you get on Google before you've really done any research is like, right, do you want to go and book a hotel right now? And in the travel industry, people typically visit so many different websites before they make a decision. So I don't know really how much it's going to take away from customer sales immediately, or if customers still want to do that research and do things on their own first.
Fabulous. Awesome. Evie, are you okay to stay on camera, and we will invite our other panelists back onto camera. They can, if they feel comfortable with that. And there's a couple of questions that have come in. I'm just going to share my screen a moment. Okay. So just before we move on to the questions, so we're really lucky because we've joined forces with Lawrence and Authoritas, and we are offering a free SERP real estate analysis for any retailer or brand out there who wants to understand how they're doing versus their competitors. And you can nominate top 3 competitors, and we'll do an audit across those SERP features that we talked about and come back with some really clear recommendations in terms of where there's opportunity for growth. So if you are interested and you would like to take advantage of that real estate analysis, you can contact us at katie@summitmedia.com, and we'd love to help you do that, and we'll surface that insight. And we're delighted to be partnering with Authoritas on that as well, who are a really great and fantastic partner for Summit and have been for a long time. Okay, so first question on the block is for Evie. Sorry, Evie. So some brands say you should invest 10% of your PPC budget into SEO. Do you work, or can you share any insights on Booking.com in terms of proportions? If not, how do you determine what's the right amount of budget to go into SEO versus PPC? And it was directed at you, but Rachel might also have an answer to that after also.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm sure you guys can help, especially with the second part. Obviously, I can let you know how we do things at Booking. So yeah, PPC is obviously the majority of what we do. It's in some ways the easiest way for us to get traffic through to the site. So we don't have a strict, this is how much we invest in each space, but we do continuously work and have teams that are dedicated to our SEO rankings. And PPC is obviously more from a marketing spend point of view. So we don't necessarily work on it from that budget point of view, but obviously, like I say, you have to spend on PPC, whereas for us, SEO is much more internally, how do we use our development teams to optimize the websites? So it will be smaller because we don't have the marketing spend, but yeah, I couldn't give you an exact ratio, but Rachel, you might.
Yeah, we don't work to strict ratios either with our clients, but I suppose it depends on their different objectives and, you know, what they want to be known for. It's obviously some areas are quite expensive to secure from a paid search point of view. But one thing we do with our clients is really take into account how you mentioned it, Evie, in terms of being flexible. So, you know, the resource that we dedicate to their account, you know, we can vary it between our paid search and our SEO team so that, you know, they're not stuck to the same thing each month. You know, we need to be reactive to that. So yeah, I don't have a strict percentage either, unfortunately. It really does vary.
Okay, good. And is Lawrence there? There's a question coming for Lawrence and maybe again, Carl, probably you're going to have an opinion on this as well. What recent SERP feature has had the biggest impact in terms of the broader landscape?
That's an interesting one because it depends where you're sitting. So if I was sitting in Evie's shoes, they're probably a bit smaller than my size 10s, but they would, you know, I would be looking at what Google's done. I mean, they got into Google Travel. I mean, you search for London to Rome, right? And that may not be a key term for you guys, but you'll see 4 ads. You'll see find results on. You'll see the Google Flight Finder, a COVID travel warning, and then you'll see the first organic result. Then you'll see a route finder telling you how long it'll take you to walk to Rome if you care to. So, you know, your organic results are impacted considerably. I don't think there's a single one. I think from an SEO perspective, clearly featured snippets really captured people's imagination because it gave people that were ranking, you know, below the first, you know, couple of positions, let's say in the top 5 or so, it gave them an opportunity to suddenly jump over the competitors they've been knocking on their door for a while. So for me, that was the one perhaps that's caused the most, you know, activity recently. And obviously, you know, SEOs have been really busy, you know, creating content to support that. But it definitely varies, of course, by industry. And you know, if Google decides to vertically integrate in your, you know, your industry next by, I don't know, having a car hire finder integrated into the top of the Google SERP results, then it's going to catch it. It's going to catch your interest. So I think, you know, it's a combination of all the result types and their impact and who else is bidding on, obviously, on ads around that. You know, that's that whole moving dynamic picture that, you know, for me is the thing that I would be looking at, not just in any one single SERP feature.
Okay, fantastic. And Carl, from a retail perspective, anything more to add?
Yeah, I think for me, with my SEO and content background, we've seen a lot of success with the featured snippets. As Lawrence said, it's captured the imagination a bit, and we did sort of try and exploit that a lot with our clients with some really good results. So we managed to not only increase visibility, but also drive higher click-through rates from obviously capturing that position 0. And if you structure the content in the right way, then you can usually do it in a way where you kind of show a preview in the snippet, but people have to click through to read the remainder of the content, which is a bit of the silver bullet, really. So we've seen a lot of good results with that. And then also the more recent things like the FAQ schema as well. So just trying to take up more of the real estate in terms of organic listings and being able to have much more visible and informational content that's there on the SERP that kind of establishes that authority and helps people to understand that you're an expert in that field, I guess.
Okay, fantastic. And then there's another question here for potentially Rachel. It doesn't say who it's directed at, but it said, on one side, I'm directed to have my own plan and look forward and focus on my own business. But on the other side, I know competitors are doing things better than me. How are you balancing, focusing on your own plan versus understanding best in practice and best market example?
Yeah, so what we do with our clients is we have a plan, over the next week, month, 3 months, for instance, but we always dedicate time to being reactive. So using some of the dashboards we've got with Authoritas to keep a track with anything that's changing. So, there's a general feeling that things in SEO can be a bit slower to move and take effect, but I think it's about spotting those things early and reacting to them. So I think, yeah, long term, have a plan that, to achieve your objectives, but there always does need to be that eye on the competitor set. Unfortunately, I don't think many businesses operate a monopoly. So yeah, keep an eye on them.
Great. So keep a watch list and
Yeah.
keep on top of your competitors and make sure that you're informed in terms of the best practice. Seems like good advice to me.
If I could jump in on that, I'd just
say,
of
course.
Just, it depends. Your competitors vary based on the SERP feature. So you'll be competing against different sites for research guides if your competitors haven't produced any research guides. So I was using the example of Prams. So you will be competing, at different areas with different people. So you can't just look at the SERP as a whole. You can't just look at the traditional competitors. Other websites are stealing users' attention and clicks. And It's just a question of whether you want to just focus on the transactional side of things, or whether you want to go up the funnel and produce some more content to drive more early stage buyers in. And if you're competing with Amazon all the time in the e-commerce arena, and they're dominating lots of niches or lots of transactional terms, then maybe that's what you have to do to give the buyers a better experience, and use things like videos and multimedia content to drive people in using the other organic snippets. And then while they're there, use product placement and promotions to try and drive them down the funnel on your site and see whether they convert, to Evie's point.
Okay, fantastic. Well, I think we are out of time. I think we've got 2 minutes left. So all that is left for me to say is thank you so much to our guests. So Carl, Rachel, Evie, Lawrence, thank you so much. Absolutely insightful stuff. And I know you put a lot of hard work into helping bring that together. So thank you very much. And to those who are online, if you want to scan and join our mailing list, I'll leave the QR code up there for a moment. So you can get in touch with Summit and you can reach out. And I say, if you did want us to come and help you understand SERP landscape and your real estate analysis, particularly against your key competitors and by feature, that's something we are available to offer, and we'll do an initial audit for absolutely free. No problem at all. Okay, so all that leaves me to say is thank you very much. Hopefully you will be back for our next event. We'll be coming very, very quickly up on the rails with the next topic and the next event, and we look forward to seeing you soon. Okay, thanks very much. Bye-bye.